Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, meet Patrice Mousseau, CEO and founder Satya Organic Skincare, an inspiring West Coast-based skincare entrepreneur who's traveled a unique journey. Starting from a media background, she's built a breakthrough skincare brand over the past decade, and as an award-winning Indigenous entrepreneur, her approach to product development differs, promoting inclusivity. Patrice reflects on the changing landscape for Indigenous female founders, shares valuable advice for retailers and aspiring entrepreneurs, and hints at an exciting future in her entrepreneurial journey. Let's listen in now. Patrice, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm very good, Michael. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me on the mic. Where am I finding you today?
I'm in North Vancouver on the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation, and it is a cold, rainy day in Vancouver.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You know, I feel like you and I have swapped places like one of those movies because I started off my career a bunch of years in brand and in retail and then got into media. And you feel like you've done the opposite, a veteran media person who got into brand and retail. So it feels like we're changing places or swap places. We've jumped right in. Tell us about yourself and your personal professional journey a bit. And like I said, from media to skincare entrepreneur. Tell us all about it.
Sure. Well, you know, and not a lot of people know what my background was in radio and television broadcasting. So I you're in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
So I was on, most of my media career was in Toronto. So I did a talk show, I had talk on CFRB. I did some stuff with News World. I did a bunch of radio. I did Sirius satellite radio. I had a music show there. I was national news anchor for APTN, worked for CBC, I had a show on the iChannel.
You're making me nervous, by the way, now, because I'm a total amateur and you're like a pro in media.
No,
so,
and you know what? I'm a total amateur too. And it's funny you should mention that because I was being asked to do some backfill for News World International, or not News World International, just News World proper. And I talked to the executive producer and I said to him, look, you got to know, like, I do not have a university education. I did not go to Ryerson for this. And he said, don't worry about it. It probably just makes you more interesting, which was, and then I stopped making excuses for, not having the education. So it's really just about who you are, I think people connect to.
And how did you find yourself in media? What took you to, what did you always want to be in media? And we'll get to what you're doing, your 10-year success, 10 years in the making. But what got you into media in the first place?
Well, that's, again, kind of a weird story. So I grew up in a really small town in northwestern Ontario called Sioux Lookout. I'm actually from a member of the Fort William First Nation as well. I'm Indigenous. And I was in Toronto modeling for several years. And I was out for dinner with a friend. And one day he said, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, you don't like doing what you're doing, which was absolutely true. I was terrible at it. Not to say that I didn't get work, but I really didn't enjoy it. And I was never good, I think, at getting my picture taken and that sort of thing. And
that is a bit of a precursor to
it is, right? But it was the 90s. So it was like, it was the thing to do. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I still want to change the world. I want to have an effect. And he said, well, why don't you get involved in media? Because we shape culture. And so I called up a company that I had done a jeans campaign for, and I asked them if I could start by answering their phones. And I just did job after job and met people. And, I ended up on CFRB because I met with the executive producer there at a CRTC meeting for another job that I had. And, it just kind of grew from there.
One thing led to another. Now you're a skincare entrepreneur. And I was reading a bit about the story, and it seems like this intersection of the personal and the professional. But tell us the story about how you came up. What's the brand? And tell us about the product and how you came up with it.
So my brand is Satya Organics, and it is something that I created out of a need because my own little girl, she developed eczema or eczema, depending on how you say it, when she was 8 months old. And I took her into the doctor because it was really bad. And the doctor's only option to me was, of course, topical steroids. So I had interviewed a woman who had written a book about the toxins in everyday cosmetics and our personal care products. And so I knew that this was not necessarily going to be a thing I want to put on my 8-month-old baby. So I used my research skills and I just looked at every piece of information I could access, medical research, academic studies, of course, traditional medicine. I bought a crock pot off of Facebook, used for $15, which I still have.
Perfect. It's in the museum.
In the museum, exactly.
In the brand museum, right?
And developed something that eventually cleared her skin issues up in 2 days. So I had made a full crock pot, and I didn't need a full crock pot anymore. So I ended up sharing it, and everybody went crazy for it. People were driving hours to come and buy this, basically from my kitchen window. And it was probably about a year later that I finally just started thinking, maybe I will make it a business, because I saw some other businesses that were creating something in the world that I could really get behind. I guess the perception, at least for me at that time, was that being in business was really just about, chasing profit and extraction and, being not necessarily things that I was really interested in. But then I thought, business can actually be a great vehicle for change, can help people, can show that there's a different way of being in the world, that is not negative. So I started by doing a farmer's market in Port Moody, which is a town just part here of Vancouver, and sold $110 and was off.
And talk about how it's evolved over these years. So you've got one of the things that brought us together, we'll talk about a bit later, is you got a major listing at a pretty big retailer. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, between the crock pot and the farmer's market and today, talk about the how many products you have and the scope and scale. Is it traded internationally? Do you sell it online? Give us just a little bit of that foundational stuff.
Yeah. So the product itself is a topical anti-inflammatory. So it's a replacement for steroids, basically, but it's made with all botanicals, plant-based ingredients. It's very simple and clean. It was very important to me that we have a whole bunch of different, go through all the certifications. So we're approved by Health Canada. We have our FDA. We are certified organic. We're made in Canada. We're Indigenous woman owned. We are, our multi-use line is approved by the EWG, the Environmental Working Group down in the US. We're plastic neutral, we're carbon neutral, we're Leaping Bunny certified, we are National Eczema Society seal of approval, and we are just about to get our B Corp certification as well.
That's a big deal. B Corp's a lot of work, eh? B Corp's a lot of work to get certified, but
that's a whole other conversation. We can definitely talk about it another time. But that all those things so our customers feel comfortable that they're really getting the top quality product that's out there on the market, and that it means a lot to us that we are providing the best of the best.
So you said, I think you said FDA. So you're traded in the U.S. as well. I've got audience on both sides of the border. So available in the States as well as Canada?
It is available in the States. It is currently also available in Hong Kong, and we are making our first toe steps into the Chinese market as well.
Oh, interesting. Let's talk about your approach in product development and business as an Indigenous entrepreneur. Do you approach things? I mean, you started by talking about, you got into media to have impact, let's say. But do you find your approach to be different as you think about it, or talk about that for a bit?
Oh, absolutely. It's when you think about business, I think as an Indigenous person, you think about it as being multifaceted. It's not really just about the product or the service that you're producing. It's, what is the impact of producing those things in the world around you, which includes for your community, the community at large, for the planet, obviously. How can we do good with this and give back? How do we find other ways to do the best that we can? Like, for example, when I first started being a stay-at-home mom and a single mom, I wanted people to be employed. And I couldn't afford 3PL at the time because, to fulfill all these orders. So what I did is I hired stay-at-home moms across the country, shipped them product, and then they did the shipping for me, which not only lowered my shipping costs, and my customers got it faster, but they got employed. So it's just about constantly thinking about the different ways of doing things, as well as how do we evolve to be better all the time.
You've been at this over a decade or under a decade or around a decade. And you, as I said, you scored fantastic listings. Shoppers Drug Mart, right? I think you just, that's what brought us together. You scored a listing at Shoppers Drug Mart. Now, over the years, many promises have been made by governments, financial institutions, retailers, voicing their support for Indigenous entrepreneurs. From a decade ago when you first started, has it changed? How is the environment better, if it is? And you find some of those provinces delivered and some outstanding? Talk about that for a bit.
Well, we are the very first Indigenous brand to ever be on the shelves at Shoppers Drug Mart.
Wow, congratulations.
Hopefully not the last.
Right.
But, it's not just about the Indigenous entrepreneur as well, although we should see reflection in the very least based on the population of our country, how many BIPOC companies are on these big retailer shelves, but also to support small and medium businesses to enter into these larger, massive organizations. It's quite difficult. So I'm hoping that we will see more open doors for businesses like mine, who are adding to the health of our economy and the types of products that we have available as well. Now, as far as, how things have evolved, I think that it's, there's more, a little more space maybe, but honestly, it's really, really difficult. I mean, we can talk about the numbers, about, the facts that, people just aren't getting investment. Women-owned businesses get it's now 1 or 2% of all venture capital. Well, you put that into a woman of color or an Indigenous woman, I mean, it's not even a 0.001, right? Not to say that venture capital is always the way that we need to go, because it absolutely is not. And
as an indicator, though, there's a lot of promises made from financial institutions or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we support entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs and Indigenous entrepreneurs, right?
I would like, if I could make anything happen with a snap of my fingers, I would love it if companies, and not just big companies, but all companies, try to set themselves procurement targets, 1 to 5%. Let's make sure that we have some representation, either in the products we buy, the people we have sitting on boards, our employees, our customers. There is so much opportunity to bring everybody into the fold. And if you're only getting your opinions from one type of person, that's not a strong business. That's a weak business. And the more, I think, diversity you can bring in, the stronger your bottom line is going to be.
Most of my audience are retailers or retail industry insiders. Honing in on retailers, what can we do better as an industry to support entrepreneurs, particularly Indigenous women entrepreneurs?
Have conversations, be available to people to talk, get involved with some of the Indigenous run organizations or minority run organizations like CAMC, the Canadian Aboriginal Minority, I'm not getting the acronym right, but it's called CAMC, and CCAB, the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, getting involved there, seeing, how can we get involved? How can we outreach to other organizations? For example, the reason why I ended up in Loblaws in the first place was through an introduction through CCAB. We had a little... Loblaws did a quick pitch competition. And, I can kind of say we blew them away because we were so ready. We had EDI and everything, all set up and ready to go. And it was kind of a no-brainer for them, but they had never heard of Satya before. So I think
it's super interesting, right? I mean, and it's not like you're new and you had distribution before. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but it's like, do you find there's enough on-ramps, if I can put it that way, or ways to get retailers to pick up the phone? And any advice for retailers about how it's funny, right? The many retailers are always saying they're looking for new. They're looking for new and interesting and connected products. But do you think there's enough on-ramps for that from your experience?
Well, you have to build the environment and the circumstance for people to feel welcome. I always call it like the field of, that movie, Field of Dreams. You build it, they will come. If you are, if you're serious about this, you want to have a concerted effort to do some outreach, spend half an hour Googling what's the best way to connect with Indigenous entrepreneurs in Canada. And just kind of go from there. A lot of people, they say, we can't find anybody, or there's nobody to hire, or there's this, that. I don't think that's true. I think people just use it kind of as an excuse. So we got the internet here. Just get yourself connected.
Let's talk about the business for a sec. So you got a big listing, and I'm curious, as an entrepreneur and as a brand in the context of retail, how you think about channel management stuff, right? So you've got a major listing in a national retailer, but you've had years of independent or other retailers supporting you. How do you manage those two things? Because you want everybody to win, right? You want the kind of one-to-one, and you've got a DTC business, you sell direct. So how in your mind do you make 1 + 1 = 3 and all that?
Well, for me, it's always about the slow managed growth too. It has been a little bit like holding the reins of a wild horse sometimes, because it's, the demand is so, so needed here. We've built relationships with people over the years, Whole Foods, Thrifties, Sobeys. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call them small and independent, but also, of course, the smaller guys, like Big Carrot in Toronto and Healthy Planet. Like, these guys are our family, and we will continue to have them as our family.
Yeah. Probably your first supporters too, right? I mean, I know actually the GM from Healthy Planet's been on the pod, and we talked about that a lot. That they find, and their work is to find entrepreneurs and give them their early start, and sometimes they grow, and they outgrow sometimes the channel, but they're kind of happy to see it, and they start working again.
And their staff is fantastic. Like, they have a great training at Healthy Planet, for example, because they take it very seriously, I think, what they do. So yeah, it's about hopefully bringing a whole new group of people that have not been exposed to Satya before through the Shoppers channel. I believe it's something like 58% of all skincare in Canada is sold at Shoppers Drug Mart. So now suddenly we've become available to help people, because eczema it's so prevalent. We're talking about 20% of the world's population suffers from it.
Is it getting worse?
It is. Yeah.
And what do you think? I mean, my daughter has a little bit of it. So what is contributing to that? Just the harsh environment? Is it environmental?
Well, the incidence is actually higher in Western countries than it is in the so-called lesser developed countries. And I think that has a lot to do with the diet and the microbiome, the overuse of hand sanitizer, for example. But I mean, eczema is a multifaceted problem as well. Like, it can come from so many different places in your life. It can be a contact dermatitis. It can be stress. It can be, weak intestinal gut flora. Like, there's just so many issues, and it takes a long time to figure it out. But when you have a product like mine, it helps to manage it and, help that with that outbreak and make it go back to normal until you can figure out what's caused it in the first place, without adding to the problem by adding, chemicals and steroids to your body.
Right on. All right. Advice to fellow entrepreneurs. And I'm going to frame this in 2 starts and 1 stop. 2 things they should start doing and 1 thing they should stop doing. Lessons learned from your journey. Stop
feeling guilty about everything you're not getting done. Some of the best advice I got was, a lady, and I was talking to her, she had a family and, this growing business. And I was interviewing her. This is before I was an entrepreneur. And she's like, I said, how do you juggle everything? She said, poorly. Like I drop stuff all the time. And you will, right? But the idea is that you just have to keep going and keep getting back up, because the only way you fail is if you stop.
What's next for you and for your brand?
We're looking obviously at making sure that Shoppers is well supported. We are looking at the Quebec market as well. We have new products coming out that are going to launch, which should be really appealing. And then, again, slowly looking at more into Asia Pacific as well as the US, because I really don't want to do too much too soon. Right. I don't want to have to be, taking out masses of money to grow, which unfortunately I think people feel like they have to do all the time. And I think it can be a choice. That being said, we've been doubling and tripling almost every year since we started. So yeah, it's fun.
And now, are you a LinkedIn person? Where can listeners go to get in touch or learn more about you and your products?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Patrice Mousseau, and or I think you can find me through the business on our socials, which is at Satya Organic. And you can always reach me on in the DMs on Instagram. I sounded so lame there, in the DMs.
In the DMs. Well, I'll put all these links into your site, into the show notes. But listen, Patrice, thanks so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast. Real treat to get to know you and hear your story. And thank you for sharing. And listen, I wish you much continued success. And we'll be watching. And congratulations on what you've achieved.
Thank you. And we'll be talking again soon, because you have an event coming up.
That's right. For all the listeners, Retail West happening in Vancouver, and you will be there. You will be on the stage, and so folks will get to meet you.
And wandering the crowd after, too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks again for joining me on the pod, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker, Rethink Retail 2023 Global Top Retail Influencer. If you want more content or to chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.